So, when I was just 12 years old, my mother asked me to sign up for a local community service group. At first, I resisted her, telling her I'd much rather spend my own free time hanging out with friends, playing sports, or even playing video games. However, ultimately upon her request, I decided to join the group. And I never would have imagined back then that I'd be standing here today talking about not only how transformational volunteering was for me, but how transformational it can be for everyone else. Well, how did we get here? Simply, in order to incentivize youth volunteers such as myself, adults across the country have taken the initiative to organize and plan youth volunteers and groups, all of which provide youth a unique opportunity to give back to their local community. States, too, have started to pick up on this trend. And now, as a result, in states such as Maryland, you need a certain amount of volunteer hours in order to graduate public high schools. Colleges have even started to openly recognize volunteering as an important extracurricular for a student's application. All of these reasons and incentives together have actually led to the highest youth volunteerism rates than ever before. In fact, at this point in time, 1 in every 2 high school students reports participating in community service activity before. These statistics have led many to believe that we are truly in the midst of a youth volunteerism wave. Well, seeing how high youth volunteerism engagement is currently, what if we could transfer this and as our youth age into adulthood? Well, let's start at the beginning. As it stands, many youth volunteers are motivated or incentivized by college, for a high school requirement, or as they are placed in a youth volunteerism group. And although these are terrific incentives now, they won't necessarily work as motivation in the future when our youth age into adulthood. So, why should we care that the sole reason and motivation for many of our youth volunteers will soon expire? And simply because transferring our youth volunteerism engagement, especially at this rate, could prove to have enormous benefits. For instance, the average adult volunteer contributes 23 more hours of community service each year than that of a youth volunteer. However, overwhelmingly the number of adults that do volunteer is actually less than youth. I mean, after all, who besides adults has enough free time and experience to organize youth volunteerism groups, plan community-wide service events, or just partake in community service activities as a whole? Which is why, if we could transfer our high youth volunteerism engagement as our youth age into adulthood, our society as a whole would be able to enormously benefit off the proud work of our volunteers. Well, the summer going into my 9th grade, I unknowingly found my own way to transfer my short-term volunteer motivation into that of long-term. After being interested in medicine, I decided to volunteer at my local hospital. My job here was simply just to deliver food to patients and, on occasion, ask them patient surveys. And although I wasn't performing life-saving heart surgery, I truly learned a lot from this experience. For instance, just a few weeks into the summer, I had one experience, one interaction that was incredibly eye-opening. Usually, when I walk into a patient's room, I'll say something along the lines of, "Good afternoon." However, when I said it to this man, I surprisingly heard no response, but a quiet mumble. So, proceeding with my next line of questioning, I asked him where he would like me to put his food. However, to my surprise yet again, he didn't even respond. So, I reiterated my question, as I don't usually do with other patients, asking him if he would like his food on his bedside table or on his bed for him to eat now. However, rather than choosing one of these two choices, he responded saying, "To my right or left?" Confused as to why I hadn't just picked one of the choices, I froze. However, while doing this, I glanced over at his bedside table and noticed a small sign saying, "Blind Man." Going through this experience, especially on my own, was incredibly eye-opening. It was an interaction that I never would have gone through if I hadn't volunteered. However, now through volunteering, I had been exposed to it. I had been pushed out of my comfort zone to interact and engage in something that I never would have done without volunteering. And this would become a common occurrence and theme for the rest of the summer. Whether it be speaking Spanish to a patient who couldn't speak English, connecting and engaging with a deaf woman, an amputee, or a newly mother of triplets, I was commonly pushed out of my comfort zone for the better. A few weeks later into the summer, I got into a rhythm of delivering food to this young man. He seemed a bit lonely. I'd never really seen any family or friends visit him during the normal visiting hours. So, although being nervous too, I decided to strike up a conversation with them. Not about the quality of the food service, as I'd done with other patients, but about our local sports team. And although this was a hard first step for me to take, it was not only rewarding for me, but more so for him. Nearly every single day, I'd deliver him his food, and we'd sit down and chat for a bit. Each day, our conversations getting longer and longer, until one day, he had come to tell me that he had no family or friends in the United States, and that he was here alone. It was really then when we had truly started to connect on a personal level. I recall the huge smile brought to his face every time I entered the room, and how it just lit up the room and made him happy. And that itself made me even happier. However, after leaving the hospital nearly every single day throughout this period of time, I was left thinking about him, something I hadn't done with other patients. I remember feeling touched and happier that I had connected with a patient. But more importantly, I remember being charged with a new form of motivation, one to connect with patients throughout the day. And it was about then when I set myself a personal challenge and goal for the end of the summer. One, to connect with whomever I talk to and speak to throughout the day, and try to bring joy to them. And after fulfilling this goal by the end of the summer, I'd unknowingly found my own way to transfer my short-term volunteer motivation into that of long-term, as I'd ultimately discovered my new long-term reason to continue to volunteer. Not one for college, as it had previously been, but one to be pushed out of my comfort zone while volunteering, and to connect and engage with others whilst doing so. After leaving the hospital nearly every single day throughout the summer, I felt happier. And not to my surprise, as research done by Harvard University shows, volunteering makes you happier and can actually allow you to live longer. In an age in which many are struggling with stress, anxiety, and other mental illnesses, finding ways to make yourself naturally happier, such as volunteering, can serve as an amazing outlet. Furthermore, volunteering actually makes you 50% less likely to abuse drugs or alcohol. Now, yes, I know that these are not sole reasons to convince our youth to continue to volunteer in the future. However, holistically, volunteering makes you a better person, and that itself is a reason to continue to volunteer. So, in order for us to transfer our current high youth volunteerism engagement as our youth age into adulthood, ultimately our youth must search for long-term reasons to continue to volunteer. Youth should continue to volunteer as it makes them happier, as it can relieve their stress, as they can connect with others while volunteering, or many of the other reasons to continue to volunteer. Volunteering is truly something that is unique, and the reasons for individuals to continue to volunteer should be unique to themselves. So, youth volunteers across the world, I set you one challenge. And that challenge is not only to continue to volunteer in the future, but also try to bring joy and happiness while doing so. Try to make a difference and bring joy to someone else's day. And I assure you, if you can fulfill this goal, you will actually become happier yourself. And after all, being a bit happier and a bit less stressed never hurt anyone else before.